Linda Morgan ran her fingers through her silver-streaked hair as she checked her reflection one last time. At 62, she still took pride in her appearance, especially for family gatherings. The pale blue dress she'd chosen complemented her eyes, and the pearl necklace, a gift from her late husband Robert, added just the right touch of elegance. She glanced at the photo of Robert on her dresser. 5 years without you, she whispered, and somehow family dinners have never been the same. The sound of her phone buzzing pulled her attention away. A text from her son Michael. "Don't forget, dinner at 6. Emily's been cooking all day." Linda smiled. Emily, her daughter-in-law of 8 years, was an accomplished chef who had recently opened her own catering business. While their relationship had grown increasingly strained over the past few years, Linda still hoped they could find common ground. She picked up the bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon she'd purchased, Emily's favorite, and the homemade apple pie she'd baked, using Robert's mother's recipe. Michael had always loved it as a child. The drive to their suburban Boston home took 30 minutes. Linda pulled into the tree-lined street, where modern homes with manicured lawns spoke of upper-middle-class comfort. Michael had done well for himself as an investment banker, and Emily's new business was apparently thriving. As Linda approached the front door, she noticed several unfamiliar cars parked along the driveway. She hesitated, checking her watch. 5:55 p.m. She was right on time, but it seemed others had arrived earlier. The doorbell chimed, and moments later, Michael opened the door. His broad smile lifted her spirits. "Mom!" He embraced her, the familiar scent of his cologne comforting. "Glad you made it." "I brought pie," Linda said, "and wine for Emily." "Great. Come on in. Everyone's already here." "Everyone?" Linda wondered as she stepped inside. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted from the dining room. "I didn't realize it was going to be a big gathering," Linda said, trying to keep her tone light. "You just mentioned family dinner." Michael's smile faltered slightly. "Emily invited some people from her new business network, potential clients and investors. I thought I mentioned that." "No," Linda said quietly, "you didn't." The dining room came into view, and Linda paused in the doorway. The large oak table, the same one she and Robert had given Michael and Emily as a wedding present, was surrounded by well-dressed strangers. Emily stood at the head of the table, gesturing animatedly as she told a story that had everyone laughing. "Emily!" Michael called out. "Mom's here." Emily turned, her smile fading just slightly as she spotted Linda. At 38, Emily was striking, tall with dark hair and the confident posture of someone used to commanding attention. "Linda?" she said, her tone polite but cool. "We weren't sure if you'd make it." Linda stepped forward. "The invitation was for 6. It's 6 o'clock." An awkward silence fell over the table. Linda felt the weight of strangers' eyes on her. "Well," Emily said with a tight smile, "as you can see, we have a full house tonight. Important contacts for the business." Linda glanced around the table. Every seat was occupied. 10 people, all strangers except for Michael and Emily's 2 children, 13-year-old Zoe and 10-year-old Lucas, who sat quietly watching the adults. "Grandma!" Lucas called out, starting to rise from his chair. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay seated, honey. We're about to serve the first course." Linda stood with the pie and wine in her hands, acutely aware of her position as an outsider in what had once been such a familiar setting. "I'll take those," Michael said quickly, reaching for the items. "Mom, why don't you—" "There's no seat for you," Emily interrupted, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "We didn't plan for extra guests tonight. This is really more of a business dinner." The silence that followed was deafening. Linda felt her cheeks burn as every eye in the room turned to her. Her son's face registered shock, then embarrassment. "Emily," he started, "we can make room." "It's fine," Linda said quietly, summoning all her dignity. "I should have called to confirm." "Grandma can have my seat," Zoe offered, half standing. "No, honey," Linda said gently. "You enjoy your dinner. I'll see you all another time." She turned to leave, hearing Michael's hurried footsteps behind her. "Mom, wait," he called as they reached the foyer. I'm so sorry. I had no idea Emily had invited all these people. Let me grab a chair from the basement. Michael, Linda said, her voice steady despite the hurt churning inside her. Your wife just told me I'm not welcome at your table. A chair won't fix that. She didn't mean it that way, Michael insisted, though his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. She's just stressed about impressing these investors. Linda looked at her son, the spitting image of his father, yet somehow unable to stand firm the way Robert always had. The table, she said softly, the one you're all sitting at. Do you remember where it came from? Michael's brow furrowed. You and Dad gave it to us for our wedding. Why? Linda nodded. Your father refinished that table himself. It was his grandmother's. 4 generations of our family have gathered around it. She reached for the door handle. I think I need to go home now. I have some things to look through. Mom? It's all right, Michael. I'll call you tomorrow. As Linda drove home, the spring evening's beauty was lost on her. Her mind was racing, remembering Robert's careful work on that table, the family documents he'd always kept in such meticulous order, and a conversation they'd had years ago about ensuring their family heirlooms were properly protected. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Linda knew exactly what she needed to do. There's no seat for me at that table, she murmured to herself as she unlocked her front door. We'll just see about that. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as Linda pulled another dusty box from the attic. She'd been searching for hours, methodically going through Robert's old files and family documents. Her normally tidy living room was now scattered with papers, folders and photo albums, physical remnants of their 40 years together. It has to be here somewhere, she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cool night air flowing through the open windows. Linda paused to look at a photograph that had slipped from one of the albums. It showed a much younger version of herself and Robert, standing proudly beside the oak dining table at their first home. Michael, just 7 years old then, sat grinning at the head of the table, his feet dangling above the floor. You always kept everything in order, Robert, she said to the empty room. You wouldn't have let something this important disappear. Jeto. The humiliation of the evening still burned in her chest. For 8 years, she had tried to build a relationship with Emily, always careful to respect boundaries, never overstepping. She'd watched as Emily gradually took Michael further from his family traditions, rarely visiting Linda's home and making excuses to miss holidays. Tonight had simply been the culmination of years of subtle rejection. Linda reached for another box labeled Family Documents, 2010-2015. This one was heavier than the others, filled with folders of financial statements, insurance policies, and legal documents. As she sifted through them, her fingers brushed against a leather portfolio she hadn't seen in years. Her heart quickened as she opened it, revealing a stack of papers with Morgan family heirlooms typed neatly across the top page. Robert had been meticulous about documenting their family possessions, especially those with sentimental or historical value. This is it, she whispered, carefully turning the pages until she found what she was looking for. Walnut oak dining table, Morgan family, circa 1890. Attached was a detailed history of the table, photographs documenting Robert's restoration work, and, most importantly, a formal gift agreement dated 8 years ago, coinciding with Michael and Emily's wedding. Linda's hands trembled slightly as she read the document. Robert, ever the thoughtful planner, hadn't simply given the table away. The agreement clearly stated that the table was being loaned to Michael and Emily for their use and enjoyment, with ownership remaining with Linda following Robert's passing. There was even a clause specifying that the table was to be used for family gatherings and was intended to keep the family connected across generations. Both Michael and Emily had signed it, though Linda wondered if Emily had ever actually read the details, or if she'd just signed what was put in front of her during the hectic wedding preparations. "Oh, Robert," Linda said softly, a sad smile crossing her face. "You tried to protect our family even then." She set the document aside and continued searching, finding additional papers that Robert had prepared, a formal appraisal of the table from an antique dealer, valuing it at $17,500 due to its craftsmanship and provenance, a maintenance guide Robert had written for Michael, and photographs documenting the table's history through 4 generations of the Morgan family. By 2 a.m., Linda had assembled everything she needed. She carefully organized the documents in the leather portfolio, added several family photographs of gatherings around the table, and finally included a handwritten letter Robert had left for Michael about the importance of family tradition. As she packed everything away, Linda caught sight of herself in the mirror. The excitement of her discovery had brought color back to her cheeks, and there was a determined glint in her eyes that had been missing for some time. "This isn't about the table," she told her reflection. "It's about respect and family. 2 things Emily needs to understand." Linda slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with memories of family dinners, Robert's laughter, and the oak table that had been the center of so many important moments. By morning, her resolve had only strengthened. Over coffee, she called her old friend Margaret, who had practiced family law before retiring. "Linda, what a lovely surprise," Margaret answered. "How are you?" "I need some advice, Marge," Linda replied, explaining the previous night's humiliation and her subsequent discovery. Margaret listened without interruption, then sighed heavily. "That's awful, Linda. No one should be treated that way, especially by family. The question is, am I within my rights? The document seems clear, but I don't want to cause more problems. Based on what you've described, you're absolutely within your rights. That table is legally yours. The loan agreement is binding, especially since both parties signed it." Linda felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, Marge. I needed to hear that." "What are you planning to do?" Margaret asked, curiosity evident in her voice. "Something memorable," Linda replied, a plan already forming in her mind. "Something that will make it clear that while I won't force my way into their lives, I won't be disrespected either." After ending the call, Linda made one more phone call to her nephew James, who owned a moving company. Then she sent a text message to Michael. "We need to talk about the family table. I'll be coming by tomorrow afternoon. Please make sure you and Emily are both home." Michael's response came quickly. "Is everything okay? Should I be worried?" Linda smiled to herself as she typed her reply. "That depends on whether there's a seat for me at the table. I'll create the 3rd chapter of your story with approximately 6,000 characters as requested." The following afternoon, Linda parked her car a few houses down from Michael and Emily's home. James's moving truck was already there, idling quietly as he waited for her signal. Her nephew gave her an encouraging thumbs up from the driver's seat. "Just give me 15 minutes, Linda said through the truck's open window. "Then bring everything up to the door." James nodded. "You sure about this, Aunt Linda? Michael's going to be shocked." "Sometimes shock is the only way to get through to people," she replied, patting his hand. "But don't worry. This is about setting things right, not burning bridges." Linda straightened her blazer, a professional navy blue she'd worn to countless school board meetings during her years as a high school principal, and walked confidently toward the house. The leather portfolio felt substantial in her hands, grounding her. When she rang the doorbell, it was Zoe who answered, her teenage face lighting up at the sight of her grandmother. "Grandma! Dad said you were coming over." She threw her arms around Linda. "I'm sorry about yesterday. That was so messed up." Linda returned the hug, breathing in the scent of her granddaughter's strawberry shampoo. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. Sometimes adults don't handle things well." Michael appeared in the hallway behind Zoe, his expression a mixture of concern and guilt. "Mom, come in. Emily's in the kitchen." "Actually," Linda said calmly, "I'd like us to talk in the dining room. It's about the table, after all." Michael's brow furrowed, but he nodded. "Sure. Zoe, could you go upstairs and check on your brother?" "But, Dad—" "Please, Zoe, just for a little while." The teenager sighed dramatically but complied, giving Linda another quick hug before trudging upstairs. As they entered the dining room, Linda noticed that the table had been cleared of the previous night's dinner party. Emily emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her expression was guarded. "Linda," she said with a tight smile, "Michael said you wanted to talk about the table. Is something wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong with the table," Linda replied evenly. "It's as beautiful as it was when Robert's grandmother first acquired it in 1890. The issue is with who owns it." Emily's smile faltered. "Owns it? You gave it to us as a wedding present, did we?" Linda opened the leather portfolio and laid out the gift agreement on the table's polished surface. "Because according to this document, which both you and Michael signed, the table was loaned to you, not given. The ownership remained with Robert and me, and following his death, with me alone." Michael stepped forward, scanning the document with growing disbelief. "Mom, I don't understand. Why would Dad set it up this way?" "Your father was a thoughtful man," Linda said, her voice softening. "He believed family heirlooms should stay in the family, available for everyone to enjoy. The agreement clearly states that the table is to be used for family gatherings, to maintain connection between generations." Emily's face had grown pale. "This can't be legally binding. It was 8 years ago." "It's completely binding," Linda replied. "I confirmed that with Margaret Thomas. You remember her, Michael. She practiced family law for 30 years. Both of you signed it willingly, with witnesses present." Michael looked up from the document, his expression pained. "Why are you doing this, Mom? If you wanted to use the table for something, you could have just asked." Linda met her son's gaze steadily. "Last night your wife told me there was no seat for me at this table. A table that has been in our family for 4 generations. A table where I've served Thanksgiving dinner for 40 years. A table where you learned to write your name, where we celebrated every one of your birthdays." She placed more documents on the table: the appraisal, the maintenance guide, the historical photographs. "This isn't about a piece of furniture, Michael. It's about respect. It's about family." Emily crossed her arms defensively. "This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. We had important business guests." "Who were apparently more important than your children's grandmother," Linda interrupted. "More important than family." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Michael looked confused. "Are you expecting someone?" "Yes," Linda said. "That would be James and his crew." "James? Your nephew James with the moving company." Michael's voice rose. "Mom, what have you done?" "I'm exercising my right as the owner of this table," Linda replied calmly. "I'm taking it back." Emily's composure finally broke. "You can't just take our dining table. Where are we supposed to eat? What about my business dinners?" "You have options," Linda said. "IKEA is having a sale. Or you could apologize sincerely, and we could discuss a new loan agreement, one that explicitly includes a seat for me at family gatherings." The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Michael ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "This is insane. I'm not letting James take our table. It's not yours," Linda reminded him, "and I have the legal right to reclaim it." Just then, Lucas appeared in the doorway, confusion written across his young face. "Dad, there are moving guys at the door. They say Grandma called them." Emily stormed past Lucas toward the front door. Michael hesitated, torn between following his wife and continuing the confrontation with his mother. "She would never have done this if Dad were still alive," he said bitterly. Linda felt the sting of his words but held her ground. "If your father were still alive, she never would have told me there was no seat for me at his family's table." Through the open dining room window, Linda could hear Emily arguing with James on the front porch. Zoe had come downstairs and was watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. "Your business contacts aren't more important than my family," Linda continued quietly. "That's what Robert believed, and that's what I taught you, or at least I thought I had." Something in Michael's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even shame. He glanced at the documents spread across the table, then at the photographs showing 4 generations of their family gathered around it. "Wait here," he said finally. He walked to the front door, where Emily was still arguing with James. Linda couldn't hear what was said, but after a few minutes Emily stormed back into the dining room, her face flushed with anger. "Fine," she snapped. "You've made your point. The table is yours. Take it. Emily, Michael said, following her. That's not what I... No, Michael, if your mother wants to break up our home over an ancient table, let her. We'll buy a new one. Linda closed her portfolio slowly. Breaking up your home was never my intention. I just wanted to be treated with the respect I deserve as your children's grandmother. Emily's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, Zoe stepped into the room. Is Grandma really taking our table? She asked, her voice small. Linda looked at her granddaughter's confused face, then at Lucas, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. The hurt and anger she'd carried since last night began to give way to something else, a realization that this confrontation was affecting not just Emily and Michael, but the children she loved so dearly. That, Linda said carefully, depends on what happens next. And I'll create the 4th chapter of your story with approximately 6,000 characters as requested. An uncomfortable silence filled the dining room. Linda looked from Zoe's confused face to Lucas's worried eyes, then to Michael, who seemed caught between loyalties. Only Emily remained resolute, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression unyielding. What happens next, Emily said coldly, is that you take your table and go, since it means more to you than your relationship with your son's family. Emily, Michael warned, his voice low. Linda shook her head slowly. That's where you're wrong. Nothing means more to me than family. That's precisely why I'm here. She turned to her grandchildren, her expression softening. Zoe, Lucas, would you give us adults a few minutes to talk? This isn't something you should have to worry about. But it's our table too, Zoe protested. We eat dinner there every night. We do our homework there. It's where we celebrate our birthdays. Linda felt a surge of emotion at her granddaughter's words, proof that the table had fulfilled exactly the purpose Robert had intended, becoming the heart of another generation's family life. I know, sweetheart, Linda said gently, and that matters to me very much. Michael placed a hand on Zoe's shoulder. Please, honey, just give us a little time. Reluctantly, Zoe and Lucas retreated upstairs, though Linda suspected they would be listening from the landing. When they were gone, Linda pulled another document from her portfolio, a letter in Robert's distinctive handwriting. She handed it to Michael. Your father wrote this to you before he died. I found it last night with the other papers. Michael took the letter, his hands trembling slightly. Emily remained by the kitchen doorway, her posture rigid, but her eyes now fixed on the letter. As Michael read, his expression changed from defensive to somber. When he finished, he looked up at Linda with tears in his eyes. Dad knew, he said quietly. Even then, he worried about us drifting apart after he was gone. Linda nodded. He saw things clearly, your father. Always did. Michael handed the letter to Emily, who hesitated before taking it. As she read, her composure faltered for the first time, her eyebrows drawing together in an expression Linda couldn't quite read. Your father writes that the table isn't just furniture, Emily said finally, her voice more subdued. He says it's a commitment, a physical reminder that family takes work and intention. Yes, Linda said, Robert believed that strongly. Every scratch on that table, every watermark, every worn spot, they're all evidence of a family that showed up, that gathered, that made time for each other despite busy lives. Emily set the letter down carefully on the table. For a long moment, she stared at it, as if wrestling with something inside herself. I never knew my grandparents, she said abruptly. My parents moved us around so much for my father's job that we never put down roots anywhere. Family heirlooms weren't part of my upbringing. It was the most personal thing Emily had ever shared with Linda, a small glimpse into what might explain her daughter-in-law's resistance to family traditions. I'm sorry to hear that, Linda said sincerely. It must have been difficult moving so often. Emily shrugged, but the gesture seemed forced. It taught me to be self-reliant, to create my own stability. She glanced around the meticulously decorated dining room. This house, my business, they're my anchors. I built them myself. Michael moved to stand beside his wife, placing a gentle hand on her back. No one's questioning what you've built, but my family history is part of who I am too. And last night, Linda added carefully, when you told me there was no seat for me at this table, it felt like you were saying there was no place for me in the family I helped create. Emily's shoulders sagged slightly. It wasn't personal, Linda. It was a business dinner, important contacts. Everything about family is personal, Linda replied. That's what makes it both wonderful and messy. Through the window, they could see James waiting patiently by his truck. The visual reminder of what was at stake seemed to focus everyone's attention. Michael cleared his throat. So what now? You take the table and we... What? Never see each other for family dinners again? That's not what I want, Linda said firmly. What I want is acknowledgement that I matter in this family. That your father's legacy matters. That some things are more important than business contacts. Emily was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from the letter to the old photographs Linda had brought, showing decades of Morgan family gatherings around the same table. Finally, she sighed deeply. I owe you an apology, she said, the words sounding as if they'd been dragged from someplace deep and uncomfortable. What I said last night was thoughtless and hurtful. I was focused on impressing my guests, and I didn't consider your feelings. The apology wasn't particularly warm, but Linda recognized the effort it had taken. Emily was not someone who admitted fault easily. Thank you, Linda said. I appreciate that. Michael looked between the two women, relief evident on his face. So we can put this behind us? The table stays, and we move forward as a family? Linda shook her head. Not quite yet. I think we need a new agreement. One that's more explicit about what this table represents. You want us to sign another contract? Emily asked, her defenses beginning to rise again. I want us to have clarity, Linda corrected, about expectations, about family commitments, about respect. She turned to a fresh page in her portfolio and began to write. The Morgan family table will remain in Michael and Emily's home, on loan from Linda Morgan under the following conditions. She listed 3 items: monthly family dinners, with all generations present holiday gatherings that honor both families' traditions, mutual respect for all family members at all times. Linda slid the paper across the table. This isn't legally binding. It's a family commitment, a promise to each other. Emily read the simple list, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she reached for a pen from the sideboard drawer and added a 4th item: open communication about scheduling conflicts and business needs. She looked up at Linda. We can't always drop everything for family dinners. My business is demanding, and it's important to me, but I can commit to better communication and finding alternatives when conflicts arise. Linda nodded slowly. That's reasonable. Michael added a 5th item in his own handwriting: recognition that family extends in all directions, honoring both Linda's history and Emily's vision for the future. We need balance, he said, looking between the 2 women in his life, between past and future, between tradition and innovation. The 3 of them looked at the simple document, a far cry from Robert's formal legal agreement, but perhaps more meaningful in its handwritten simplicity. I'll sign this, Emily said finally, and I'll mean it. Linda felt a weight lifting from her chest, not completely gone, but lighter. Then I'll tell James he can go. The table stays. As Linda moved toward the front door, she heard quick footsteps on the stairs. Zoe and Lucas had indeed been listening. So you're not taking our table? Lucas asked, relief evident in his voice. No, sweetheart, Linda assured him. The table is staying right where it belongs. And you'll come for dinner more often? Zoe asked hopefully. Linda glanced at Emily, who gave a small but definite nod. Yes, Linda said, smiling at her grandchildren. I'll have a seat at this table again. We all will. As she stepped onto the porch to dismiss James, Linda felt a bittersweet sense of accomplishment. The confrontation had been difficult but necessary. Robert would have understood. Family sometimes required difficult conversations to stay whole. When she returned to the dining room, Emily was showing the children the old photographs Linda had brought. This was your great-great-grandmother, she was explaining, pointing to a sepia-toned image of a stern-faced woman beside the much younger table. The table came from her family originally. It was the first time Linda had ever seen Emily show interest in the Morgan family history, and it gave her hope that perhaps this conflict had opened a door that had long been closed. "I have more photographs at home," Linda offered, "and letters too. The Morgans were great letter writers. Maybe we could look through them together," Emily suggested, her tone cautious but not unwelcoming. "The children should know their history." As Linda nodded in agreement, she caught Michael's eye. Her son smiled, a genuine smile of relief and gratitude. The table between them had become, once again, not a point of division, but a place of connection, exactly as Robert had intended all along. "I understand you want me to continue the story by creating the 5th chapter, with approximately 8,000 characters. I'll craft this next chapter of your family drama now." 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation over the table. Linda sat in her garden, enjoying the late spring sunshine as she trimmed her rose bushes. The peaceful routine of gardening had always helped her process her thoughts, and today she had plenty to consider. The new agreement with Emily and Michael hung on her refrigerator, a reminder of promises made and, so far, kept. They'd had their first family dinner the previous Sunday, a slightly awkward affair at first, with Emily clearly making an effort to be welcoming while still maintaining her natural reserve. The children had helped bridge the tension, eager to share school stories with their grandmother and show her their latest achievements. Linda snipped a fading bloom, remembering how Lucas had proudly demonstrated his progress on the piano while Zoe had shared her science project on renewable energy. Michael had seemed more relaxed than Linda had seen him in years, as if the clearing of the air had lifted a burden from his shoulders as well. The sound of her phone ringing interrupted her reflections. Linda peeled off her gardening gloves and reached for it, surprised to see Emily's name on the screen. "Emily," she answered, trying to keep any wariness from her voice. "How are you?" "Linda," Emily replied, her tone businesslike but not cold. "I'm calling because I have a situation. I was hoping you might be able to help." Linda set down her pruning shears. "What kind of situation?" "It's about my parents," Emily said with a sigh. "They've decided to visit this weekend. It was very last minute, typical of them, and normally I'd just handle it, but, Linda prompted when Emily trailed off. "But I have a major catering event on Saturday. It's for the mayor's charity fundraiser, and I can't reschedule or hand it off to my staff. Michael has that conference in New York he can't get out of, and my parents—" Emily hesitated. "They're not great with the kids for extended periods. They mean well, but they're not exactly hands-on grandparents." Linda could hear the strain in Emily's voice, the pride that made asking for help difficult warring with practical necessity. "You need someone to help with Zoe and Lucas while your parents are here?" Linda guessed. "Yes," Emily admitted. "Would you be willing to come over on Saturday? Maybe show them around Boston a bit? My mother mentioned wanting to see the historical sites, and I know how knowledgeable you are about local history from your teaching days." Linda couldn't help but feel surprised and oddly touched that Emily was reaching out to her. It was a small olive branch, but significant coming from someone who had always been so fiercely independent. "I'd be happy to," Linda said. "What time should I come over?" The relief in Emily's voice was palpable. "Would 10 o'clock work? My parents arrive tomorrow evening, and I'll need to leave for the venue by 9:30 on Saturday morning." "10 is perfect," Linda assured her. "And Emily, thank you for thinking of me." There was a pause on the line. "Well, you are their grandmother," Emily said finally. "And you were right about family being important. I'm trying to do better with that." Hee-hoo. After they hung up, Linda sat back in her garden chair, a thoughtful smile playing across her lips. Perhaps there was hope for a real relationship with her daughter-in-law after all. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. Linda dressed carefully in a casual but elegant outfit. Linen slacks and a light blue blouse that Michael had once commented brought out the color of her eyes. She packed a tote bag with some Boston guidebooks, a few healthy snacks for the children, and a small gift she'd picked up for Emily's parents. The drive to Michael and Emily's home felt different this time. Purpose without tension, anticipation without dread. When she arrived, the front door opened before she could ring the bell, revealing a harried-looking Emily in full catering chef attire. "Linda, thank God," she said, ushering her inside. "I'm running late and my mother is already asking a million questions about the neighborhood property values." Linda couldn't help but chuckle. "Deep breaths. I've got this. You focus on your event." Emily paused, really looking at Linda for perhaps the first time. "I appreciate this. Truly. Family helps family," Linda said simply. "Now go wow the mayor with your culinary magic." Emily actually smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually serious face. "The kids are in the kitchen with my parents. I've told them you're in charge of the day's activities." As Emily hurried out to her catering van, Linda made her way to the kitchen. The scene that greeted her was one of barely contained chaos. Lucas was attempting to explain the rules of a complex video game to an elderly man who looked completely bewildered, while Zoe was texting furiously on her phone, seemingly oblivious to an elegant woman in her 60s who was inspecting the kitchen appliances with a critical eye. "Hello," Linda said warmly. "I'm Linda Morgan, Michael's mother." The woman turned, her perfectly coiffed silver hair not moving an inch. "Ah, the former mother-in-law. I'm Victoria Chen, and this is my husband, Harold. We've heard so much about you." Linda doubted that very much, given Emily's usual reticence about family matters, but she smiled politely. "All good things, I hope. It's wonderful to meet you both." Harold Chen looked up from Lucas's game demonstration with evident relief. "Linda, yes, Emily mentioned you'd be showing us around today. Very kind of you." There was something in his grateful expression that told Linda volumes about the family dynamics. These were people more comfortable in art galleries than playing with grandchildren, more at ease discussing investment portfolios than video games. "I thought we might explore some of Boston's historical sites," Linda suggested. "The weather's perfect for walking, and there's a wonderful lunch spot near Faneuil Hall that the children love." Victoria raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Historical sites? How quaint. We were rather hoping to see some of the luxury developments Emily mentioned. Perhaps the new condominiums in Back Bay?" Linda caught Zoe rolling her eyes behind her grandmother's back and had to suppress a smile. "We could certainly include that in our itinerary," she said diplomatically. "But Boston's history is truly fascinating. Did you know that the dining table you ate breakfast at this morning is actually older than many of the buildings on the Freedom Trail?" Harold's interest visibly piqued. "Really? Emily said it was an antique, but I had no idea." "It dates back to 1890, Linda explained, running her hand lovingly over the polished wood. "It's been in the Morgan family for 4 generations. Victoria's dismissive expression softened slightly. 4 generations? That's quite remarkable in American terms. Our family ancestral home in Taiwan has porcelain that dates back to the Ming Dynasty." Linda recognized the comment for what it was, a gentle reminder of status and heritage. But rather than feeling defensive, she found herself genuinely curious. "I'd love to hear more about your family history," she said sincerely. "Michael has mentioned that your family has quite a distinguished lineage." Something in Victoria's posture relaxed, just slightly. "Well, on my mother's side we can trace our ancestry back to a scholar official in the imperial court." Sigh. By the time they set out for their day of sightseeing, Linda had learned more about Emily's family background than she had in 8 years of strained holiday conversations. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Emily's drive for perfection, her emphasis on appearances, her focus on achievement over emotional connection. These weren't simply personality traits. They were values instilled by generations of a family that prized excellence and outward success. As they walked the Freedom Trail, Linda found herself in the unexpected role of bridge builder. When Victoria complained about the summer heat, Linda produced a delicate paper fan from her bag, a thoughtful touch that earned her a nod of approval. When Harold mentioned his interest in Revolutionary War history, Linda guided them to lesser-known sites with fascinating stories that kept even Zoe engaged. By mid-afternoon, as they sat in the shade of the Boston Common, Linda realized something surprising. She was enjoying herself. Victoria's initially cold demeanor had warmed considerably as they discovered a shared passion for gardening. Harold had proven to be a thoughtful man, with a dry wit that reminded Linda, somewhat disconcertingly, of Robert. "Grandma Linda knows everything about Boston," Lucas declared proudly as he finished the ice cream she'd bought him. "She used to be a teacher, and she knows all the best stories." "High school principal, actually," Linda corrected gently, "but I always loved history." Victoria gave her an appraising look. "A principal? Emily never mentioned that. She said you were retired." "I am now," Linda said with a smile. "But I spent 30 years in education, the last 15 as principal of Lexington High School." "That's a very respected position," Harold noted, seeming genuinely impressed. "Leadership and education, two values we've always emphasized in our family." "Mom was the youngest female principal in the district," Zoe added, glancing up from her phone. "Dad told me that once. Said she broke like a bunch of glass ceilings or whatever." Linda felt a rush of warmth that Michael had shared that with his daughter. "It wasn't easy in those days," she acknowledged, "but I loved the work." As the conversation flowed, Linda began to see the outlines of a new possibility, not just a truce with Emily, but a genuine blending of families, each with their own strengths and traditions. The Chens clearly valued achievement, education, and status. The Morgans prioritized history, connection, and emotional bonds. Perhaps there was room for both approaches in their shared grandchildren's lives. When they returned to the house, late that afternoon, tired but content, they found Emily already home, her catering event successfully completed. She looked surprised to see her parents chatting animatedly with Linda as they entered. "You're back early," Victoria commented, kissing her daughter's cheek. "How was the mayor's event?" "It went exceptionally well," Emily replied, her eyes moving curiously between her parents and Linda. "They've already booked us for their holiday gala." "That's wonderful, dear," Harold said. "Linda has been showing us the historical side of Boston. Did you know your dining table dates back to 1890? Quite remarkable craftsmanship." Emily's eyebrows rose slightly as she caught Linda's eye. "Yes, it has. Quite a history." "We're going to wash up before dinner," Victoria announced. "Linda recommended that little Italian place on Newbury Street, and Harold's made reservations for all of us at 7. As the Chens headed upstairs with the children, Emily turned to Linda with an expression of bemused disbelief. "You've charmed my parents," she said. "I'm not sure whether to be impressed or terrified." Linda laughed softly. "They're lovely people, Emily. Different from what I'm used to, but lovely nonetheless. I can see why you're so driven and accomplished, coming from that family." Emily leaned against the kitchen counter, suddenly looking tired. "They have very high expectations, always have." "That can be challenging," Linda acknowledged, "but also motivating, I imagine." Emily nodded slowly. "It pushed me to excel, to build something of my own." She gestured around the beautiful home, "to create perfection wherever I could control it." "And when things aren't perfect?" Linda asked gently. Emily's gaze dropped to the floor. "I don't handle that well, as you've seen." It was the most vulnerable Linda had ever seen her daughter-in-law, a glimpse behind the polished facade to the very human woman beneath. "None of us do," Linda said kindly. "Perfection is impossible in families. Messy is normal. What matters is that we keep showing up." Emily looked up, meeting Linda's eyes directly. "I'm not very good at the messy parts, but I'm trying." "That's all any of us can do," Linda said. "Try, forgive, try again." Emily straightened, her composure returning. "Thank you for today, for handling my parents, for taking the kids. It means a lot." "That's what family does," Linda said simply. "We help each other." As Emily nodded and turned to prepare for dinner, Linda caught sight of their handwritten agreement, still posted on the refrigerator. Alongside it now hung a child's drawing, clearly Lucas's work, showing stick figures of various sizes gathered around a brown rectangle that could only be the family table, all of them, together, finding their seats at last. 6 months had passed since the day Linda had reclaimed her place at the family table. The New England autumn had painted the world in brilliant shades of orange and gold, and Thanksgiving was fast approaching. Linda hummed softly as she polished the silver, her mother's pattern that had graced holiday tables for decades. This year, for the first time since Robert's passing, the entire family would be gathering at her home for the celebration. The idea had come from Emily, surprisingly enough. During their now regular monthly family dinners, she had casually suggested that they revive the tradition of Thanksgiving at Linda's house. The children should experience it the way Michael did growing up, she'd said. And my parents will be in Taiwan, visiting relatives, so it would just be the 5 of us. Linda had been touched by the gesture, recognizing it as the peace offering it was. In the months since their confrontation and subsequent day with Emily's parents, something had shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, they were still too different for that, but a mutual respect that made family gatherings comfortable rather than tense. The doorbell rang, interrupting Linda's polishing. She glanced at the clock, only 2 o'clock, hours before anyone was expected to arrive for their pre-Thanksgiving dinner preparation. Opening the door, she was surprised to find Emily standing on her porch, alone. "Emily, is everything all right?" Emily nodded, a touch of nervousness in her expression that was unusual for her typically composed demeanor. "Everything's fine. I wanted to speak with you privately before everyone arrives later." Linda stepped aside, welcoming her in. "Of course. Come in. Would you like some tea?" "That would be nice, thank you." As Linda prepared the tea, she noticed Emily surveying the living room with interest, pausing to examine photographs and mementos she'd never paid much attention to during previous visits. "Your home is very warm," Emily commented, running her fingers along the spines of books that filled the built-in shelves. "It feels lived in a good way." Linda smiled as she set the tea tray on the coffee table. "That's one way of saying it's cluttered with memories." "No," Emily said thoughtfully. "It's not cluttered. Everything has meaning. Everything belongs." She accepted the cup Linda offered. "Our house is more like a design showroom sometimes. Perfect but impersonal," Linda suggested gently. Emily nodded, surprising Linda with her candor. "Yes, it's something I've been thinking about lately." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Linda waited, sensing that Emily had come with something specific on her mind. Finally, Emily set down her cup. "I wanted to talk to you about tomorrow, about Thanksgiving. Is there something special you'd like me to prepare?" Linda asked. "I know the children are looking forward to my sweet potato casserole, but I'm open to incorporating some of your family traditions as well." "It's not about the food," Emily said, then smiled slightly, "though I'm sure it will be wonderful. It's about what happened 6 months ago, about the table." Linda's heart quickened. They hadn't directly discussed the confrontation since it happened, both seemingly content to move forward without revisiting the painful episode. "What about it?" she asked carefully. Emily reached into her handbag and withdrew a folded document. "I've been doing some thinking about family, about traditions, about what we leave behind." She handed the paper to Linda. "I had my lawyer draw this up. I'd like you to read it." With a puzzled frown, Linda unfolded what appeared to be a legal document. As she scanned the contents, her eyes widened in surprise. "This is a trust document," she said, looking up at Emily. "For the table." Emily nodded, her usual self-assurance tinged with vulnerability. "It's a family trust. Michael and I are establishing it to protect certain family heirlooms and ensure they remain part of the Morgan family legacy for generations to come." Linda continued reading, her heart filling with emotion as she understood the document's purpose. The trust would ensure that items of family significance, beginning with the oak dining table, would be protected as shared family property, never to be sold or disposed of without unanimous consent of all adult family members. "The way I see it," Emily continued when Linda remained speechless. These things don't really belong to any one person. Not to me, not to Michael, not even to you. They belong to the family, past, present, and future. The trust makes that official. Linda blinked back unexpected tears. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Emily replied. Just sign as a trustee, if you're willing. Michael already has. As Linda looked more closely at the document, she noticed something else. The trust included not just the table, but several other Morgan family heirlooms. Robert's grandfather's pocket watch, the silver service she'd just been polishing, and a few other treasured items. How did you know about these things? Linda asked. Emily smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed her face. I asked Michael to show me what mattered in your family, and then I asked Zoe and Lucas what they remembered most from visits to your house. It was actually quite revealing. Linda felt a surge of gratitude and something else, respect for this complicated woman who had found her own way to honor family legacy while still maintaining the independence that was so fundamental to her character. There's something else, Emily said, reaching once more into her bag. This time she withdrew a small velvet pouch. This isn't for the trust. It's just something I wanted you to have. Linda opened the pouch and tipped a delicate silver locket into her palm. The antique piece was exquisitely crafted, with a filigree pattern that spoke of another era. It belonged to my grandmother, Emily explained. My mother gave it to me when I graduated from college. It's been passed down through the women in our family for generations. Linda looked up in shock. Emily, I can't accept this. It's your family heirloom. Exactly, Emily said quietly. And your family now, really family, not just by marriage. These past months have shown me that. She hesitated, then added, I never had a grandmother I was close to. I want Zoe to have what I didn't, a connection to her history, to the women who helped shape who she is. Deeply moved, Linda carefully placed the locket back in its pouch. Thank you. I'll treasure it. Emily nodded, seemingly embarrassed by the emotional moment. She stood briskly, smoothing her immaculate slacks. Well, I should go. Michael is picking up the children from their activities, and we'll all be back at 5 to help with preparations. As Linda walked her to the door, Emily paused on the threshold. I never properly apologized, you know, for that night, for saying there was no seat for you. You've shown your apology in your actions, Linda assured her. That means more than words. Emily shook her head. Still, I was wrong, and I hurt you. I'm sorry. The simple, straightforward acknowledgement meant more to Linda than elaborate explanations or excuses would have. Thank you, she said simply. I accept your apology. After Emily left, Linda sat for a long while with the trust document and the locket, reflecting on the strange, winding path that had led them here. From humiliation to confrontation to understanding, it hadn't been easy, but perhaps the most valuable connections rarely were. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline November day that showcased New England at its finest. By afternoon, Linda's modest home hummed with activity. Michael and Emily had arrived early to help with preparations, the children bouncing with excitement at the novelty of holiday cooking at Grandma's house. To Linda's surprise, Emily had thrown herself into the kitchen work with enthusiasm, donning an apron over her designer outfit without concern for spills or stains. Her professional culinary skills had elevated Linda's traditional recipes, the two women working together in unexpected harmony. "Mom! Where do you keep the extra folding chairs?" Michael called from the dining room. "We'll need them for the table." "In the hall closet," Linda replied, smiling at the memory of another time when there hadn't been enough seats at a table. As they gathered around the expanded dining table, the Morgan family oak now adorned with Linda's best tablecloth and Emily's artistic centerpiece, Linda looked at the faces surrounding her. Michael, so like his father in the way he carefully carved the turkey. Emily, her usual perfectionism, channeled into creating a beautiful experience rather than an exclusive one. Zoe and Lucas, their young faces alight with the simple joy of family togetherness. "Before we eat," Linda said, "I'd like to say something." She reached for her wine glass. In our family, we've always had a tradition of sharing what we're thankful for. I'd like to start by saying how grateful I am to have all of you here, in my home, around this table that has seen so many Morgan family gatherings. Michael smiled warmly. I'm thankful for second chances, he said, his gaze moving between his mother and his wife, and for the wisdom to recognize when something precious is at risk of being lost. I'm thankful for traditions, Emily said, surprising everyone with her heartfelt tone. Both old ones we're reviving and new ones we're creating together. I'm thankful for Grandma's sweet potato casserole, Lucas declared, bringing laughter to the table. Zoe, thoughtful as always, took a moment before speaking. I'm thankful that we're all here together. Last year felt different. This feels right. As they began to pass dishes around the table, Linda couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she had stood in Emily and Michael's dining room, contract in hand, prepared to reclaim what was legally hers. Today, they sat at the same table, now situated in her home, sharing food and conversation as a family should. The meal progressed with the comfortable rhythm of people who had found their footing with one another. Emily shared stories about her catering business's recent success, while Michael spoke of a mentoring program he'd started at his firm. The children regaled Linda with school adventures and friend dramas, secure in the knowledge that their grandmother was now a regular, welcome presence in their lives. As Linda served her famous apple pie, Robert's favorite recipe, Emily leaned over to speak quietly. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said. "Those photo albums you mentioned months ago, with the Morgan family history, I'd like to look through them sometime, maybe create digital copies to preserve them." Linda nodded, touched by the request. "I'd like that. There are stories behind most of those photographs that should be passed down. Perhaps we could work on it together," Emily suggested. "Make it a project for those winter weekends when there's not much else to do." The idea of spending time with Emily on a shared family project would have seemed impossible a year ago. Now, it felt like a natural evolution of their newfound understanding. "I'd enjoy that very much," Linda replied sincerely. As the evening drew to a close, with dishes washed and leftovers packed for everyone to take home, Linda found herself standing alone in the dining room. The table, cleared now except for a few candles still burning low, gleamed in the soft light. She ran her hand along its polished surface, feeling the subtle imperfections that told its story. A water ring from some long-ago gathering, a small scratch from when Michael was learning to write, the slight unevenness where Robert had repaired a damaged corner. "You were right," Emily's voice came from the doorway. Linda turned to see her daughter-in-law watching her with an uncharacteristically gentle expression. "It is more than just furniture," Linda smiled. "Robert always said that a family needs anchors, physical reminders of who they are and where they came from." Emily nodded, coming to stand beside her at the table. "I understand that better now." She hesitated, then added, "My parents called earlier. They're coming for Christmas." "That's wonderful," Linda said. "The children will be excited." "I told them we'd be having Christmas dinner at our house," Emily continued. "Around this table, all of us together." She met Linda's gaze directly. "Including you, of course. There will always be a seat for you." The words, an exact reversal of those that had sparked their conflict, were clearly chosen with deliberate care. Linda felt their significance wash over her, the final healing of an old wound. "I would like that very much," she said simply. Later, as Michael loaded the last of the leftovers into their car and the children gave final hugs goodbye, Linda stood on her porch, watching the family prepare to leave. The trust document lay signed on her desk inside, the silver locket rested against her heart, and the promise of future gatherings warmed her more than her sweater in the November chill. As they pulled away, Linda thought of Robert, and how pleased he would have been to see their family finding its way back to wholeness. The table he had so carefully preserved would continue to gather Morgans around it for generations to come, not because of legal documents or family trusts, though those now existed, but because of the harder, more important work of building understanding across differences. Linda turned to go inside, content in the knowledge that some legacies couldn't be measured in antiques or heirlooms, but in the invisible bonds that connected people across time, across conflicts, and across the polished surface of a well-loved table where there was, now and always, a seat for everyone.